all of this, but the conversation quickly went off the rails over Michael Wolff's new book. CNN pulled the plug on the interview.
The reason why I want to talk about the president's experiences, what I've seen with him traveling to meet dozens of foreign leaders, with his incredible work.
Okay, you're not answering the questions.
No,
I understand.
You have 24 hours a day of anti-Trump material, and you're not going to give 3 minutes for the American people to hear the real experience of Donald Trump.
There's one viewer that you care about right now, and you're being obsequious. You're being a factotum in order to please him, okay?
No.
And I think I've wasted enough of my viewers' time.
You know who I care
Stephen.
about?
As Republicans, lawmakers call for Attorney General Jeff Sessions to resign.
Well, that got pretty intense, and it continued during the commercial break. We know that because someone at CNN leaked a transcript of Miller's post-interview remarks. They were apparently on tape. It was all done in an effort to embarrass him, apparently. Stephen Miller joins us tonight. Stephen Miller, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So CNN called around to news organizations today and said that you were escorted off the set by security. Presumably you were not a physical threat, you were not armed. My question is, they felt you were a threat. Do you think if you had been, I don't know, a member of MS-13 here illegally, that CNN would have had security pull you off the set?
Well, I assume if I was a member of MS-13 here illegally, they would be clamoring to get me into the voting booth. But I think that, that like many things CNN says, the latest story has the most important virtue of all CNN stories of being not true.
Well, here's what we know is true, and here's
an amusing story,
was
but not a true
striking
one.
to me about the whole thing. So there was a video apparently taken without your knowledge of you on the set after the segment ended during the commercial break, and someone, apparently from CNN, I don't know who else would have access to it, leaked that to other news organizations. What do you make of that?
Well, it's just another example of CNN's very low journalistic standards. But I was glad to have people hear what I said on camera and off camera, which is that CNN has been extraordinarily biased, extraordinarily unfair to the president, and is not giving their information, their viewers honest information.
So you wanted to talk about immigration, and the DACA debate is obviously the focus of a lot of energy in the Congress right now. The priorities for the administration, you have said, are ending chain migration, financing a border wall, and ending the diversity lottery. Of those three, what would you say is the most important priority from your point of view?
Well, look, we need them all because the reality is that anything you do on DACA is going to have some predictable consequences, right? You're going to have an increase in new illegal immigration, so you need to have a wall, you need to close the enforcement loopholes. And then you're also going to have an increase in the overall number of people coming into the country, and that's why you have to deal with chain migration, you have to deal with the visa lottery. And these are crucial reforms to make the system work for Americans. You know, Donald Trump has a very radical idea, and that's that when we make changes to our immigration laws, the group we should be most concerned about are everyday, hardworking Americans, the citizens who make this country run, who obey the laws, follow the rules, pay their taxes, show up and vote, the people who are loyal to this country. And Donald Trump is saying our country should be loyal to them in return.
So Democrats argue back that ending chain migration and ending the diversity lottery would prevent a lot of people, decent people, from coming to this country. What's their argument against financing a border wall? Why do you think they oppose that?
Well, as you know, I mean, they all voted for a border barrier, a hard physical border barrier back in 2006, the Secure Fence Act. Joe Biden voted for it, Barack Obama voted for it, Hillary Clinton voted for it, et cetera. So that's it's just a new position they apparently have, that they're opposed to any form of border
security. What animates it? Like, why is that an absolute sticking point for Democrats? A bunch of them have said, including in leadership, we're not supporting anything that includes financing a border wall. Why? What's their objection to that?
If Democrats oppose a border wall, they're just saying they want continued, unending illegal immigration. But let me deal with your other question, too. You talked about, they say, well, you know, if you have chain migration, it could keep good people out. There's 7 billion people in the world. Most of them are good, hardworking, decent, honest, principled people. But the reality is there's a limit to how many people any country can bring in. And we as a country have a right to say we want to bring people in based on their ability to contribute to our economy, to be safe, productive citizens, and to uplift the nation as a whole. You know, you think about our current system of chain migration, Tucker. So over the last 10 years, we've admitted about 10 million people through our chain migration system. To understand how many people that is, you're talking about every hour, that's about the size of a high school auditorium, Every day, it's the size of a large high school. Every week, a small city. Every month, a medium to average sized city. And every year, a very large city, a city the size of Washington, D.C., or almost to San Francisco, every single year, just through chain migration. What's the effect of that on taxpayers? What's the effect of that on wage earners? What's the effect of that?
And that's legal.
Right. That's just folks coming in on green cards through chain migration.
So what's I always ask this question of proponents of immigration, including of illegal immigration. What's the ideal number of immigrants, people from other countries moving here every year?
Right, and oftentimes they don't have an answer to that question.
Well, what's your answer?
I have my own views on it, but I think the important point is that ending chain migration, as the president has called for, is necessary not just for economic security, but for national security. You saw the recent attempted terrorist attack in New York. The individual who came here was brought through the chain migration system. Right, they came through a nephew green card.
Right.
And that's just not a smart way for a country to run its immigration system.
So what should be the criteria for entry in the United States?
Well, Donald Trump supported the RAISE Act, and it looked at things like, what's your proficiency in the language? What economic skills do you have? Do you have a background in sciences? Do you have a background in engineering? Do you have a background in law or writing? It looked at things like your age. Obviously, if you bring in immigrants who are in their 80s or 90s, that's going to have a significant expense on society. So you want folks primarily in their working years.
But what about, we interviewed someone last week who said, well, who will pick the strawberries? How many immigrants, low-wage, low-skilled immigrants, do we need a year for the ag sector?
Well, as you know, only about 1% of the immigrant population of the country works in agriculture. So it's discussed a lot, but it's a very small portion of the overall labor force. The typical job that a lower skilled immigrant worker might do might be construction work, it might be hospitality work, it might be restaurant work, or it might be not working at all and just going onto the welfare system if there isn't a job for that individual.
So if there's no clear economic rationale for our current immigration system, and it doesn't sound like there is one, there's no economist saying we need to bring in this number of low-skilled immigrants, then why does the Democratic Party support our current system and want to liberalize our current system so vehemently? What motivates them?
Well, you're asking the right question. But I think in the context of this debate, the question that the president is putting before the American people is, when we have an immigration system, whose needs are we fundamentally trying to serve? The needs of special interests, the needs of politicians, the needs of foreign countries and foreign nationals, and the needs of our own country and our own workers. And so at the end of the day, our hope for a bipartisan deal is that you could have enough Democrats say that, listening to the voters and the voice of the American people, we want a system that serves American workers first. And what Donald Trump has done that's so exceptional is, for the first time that I can remember, for the first time you can probably remember, we have a president of this country who, when he talks about immigration, he talks about what is right for the everyday, hardworking person.
So we're almost out of time, so I just want to get to the one quick political question, which is, Democrats have said they're not going to come to any deal with these three components in it: border wall, reducing chain migration, ending diversity lottery. Where's the wiggle room on the White House side?
Look, Democrats ultimately have to make a choice. They care a lot about providing a benefit to illegal immigrants. We're saying to them, if you want to make that deal, then you have to deliver benefits for American families and American taxpayers too. And if both sides are willing to agree to those terms, Tucker, then we can have a deal. And most importantly, we can have an immigration system that 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now produces more assimilation, higher wages, more economic opportunity, and better prospects for immigrants and U.S.-born alike.
Stephen Miller, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Well, negotiations over DACA are ongoing, as you just heard, and the stakes are high. How high are they politically? Well, one progressive group, maybe one of the biggest, is now admitting that amnesty for illegal immigrants is central to the Democratic Party's political future. The Center for American Progress Action Fund recently sent out a letter demanding the Democratic Party stand up to the Republicans in the White House to defend DACA. We're going to get to the debate in just a minute. This is the president live on a football field in Atlanta. I believe we're going to listen into the national anthem.
Accompanied by the inspirational voices of David Walker and High Praise, please welcome multi-platinum Grammy-winning artist Zach Brown Band.
President of the United States on the field at the National Championship in Atlanta, Georgia, with the color guard. Of course, that was, needless to say, the national anthem, standing for it. All right, we get back to our interview on the question of DACA. Henry Fernandez is a fellow at the Center for American Progress. It's one of the biggest progressive groups in Washington. That's the Action Fund sister organization. He joins us tonight. Mr. Fernandez, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Tucker.
So you all sent out a fundraising pitch recently, just the other day, trying to rally Democrats to sort of stiffen the backbone of Democrats in the Congress to resist any kind of concessions on DACA. And in it was this line, which jumped out because it's something we've been saying on the show, and I've never heard anybody admit it out loud. You said this: the fight to protect Dreamers is not only a moral imperative, it is also a critical component of the Democratic Party's future electoral success. Now,
that's right.
We've said a couple of times that the Democratic Party has basically given up on the middle class of the country in favor of importing new voters, and we were denounced as alt-right for saying that. And you were honest enough to admit it in a fundraising pitch, and I just want to thank you for that and for clarifying the terms of the debate.
Well, obviously, we don't look at it the way you do. What we're making clear is that there's a tremendous amount of support for fixing the DACA problem that President Trump created, for a clean DREAM Act, by a tremendous amount of support. Your Fox News polling says that over 80% of Americans support making sure that we fix the problem that was created by President Trump with regard to DACA and make sure that these young people can stay here in the U.S. When 80% of Americans support something, it makes a lot of sense for elected officials of all parties to stand with the American people.
Right. But that's actually not what the numbers show, because if you break it out into the terms that are actually under debate, chain migration, for example, that has very little support from voters. Most voters don't think that you ought to be able to come here illegally, get amnesty, and then bring your relatives. They don't think that. Most voters, in fact, think we let in too many immigrants of all kinds under all programs, and they're not, as you know, for the diversity lottery. These are all things that Democrats support. So actually, on the specifics, the Democrats are on the other side of public opinion, as you know.
Well, actually, the polls, at least the Fox poll, which I'm going to assume you think is reliable, says very clearly that what we're talking about here, what's up for debate in the Congress, was actually stopped by President Trump, was DACA, and so we need a Clean Dream Act. That's incredibly popular. The other issues that you're raising are not actually up for debate, other than that President Trump has put them on the table.
No, but hold on. You'll concede that most Americans don't think you ought to be able to come here illegally and then bring your relatives with you. They don't. And the polling on that is really clear. And Democrats do think that.
Yeah, I would concede that if you concoct a poll that uses language like you just used, you could probably get Americans to agree to many things. But if you look at polling from legitimate polling organizations that clarify for voters specifically, in fact, what we're talking about here, which is that family members, U.S. citizens, should be able to petition for their family members to get visas to come to the United States. That's pretty darn popular.
So you think that most people would support giving amnesty, a path to citizenship for people here illegally, including the Dreamers, and then say, yes, it's okay to bring your relatives here? I just don't think there's any evidence that that's true. But let me ask you the economic question.
Go ahead, Tucker, sure.
The Dreamers are far less educated than a random sample of American citizens, less likely to graduate from high school, less likely to graduate from college, far less likely to be able to read and write English. Is there a single economist you're aware of who says that?
That's not true.
Well, it is.
That's not true, though.
Well,
no,
actually, it is true.
To be eligible for DACA, you have to have graduated from high school. 88% of Americans have graduated from high school. To be eligible for DACA, you have to have graduated from high school or be in high school. So that's 100%.
Or the equivalent.
100%.
Okay,
well, but when we count Americans who have graduated from high school, we include those people who have a GED.
Right. Okay.
So it's the same. So
this is it's not actually the same. This is the Migration Policy Institute. It's a left-leaning group. DACA holders are somewhat less educated than the overall U.S. population of similar ages. Quote, and far less likely to have completed college, 4% versus 18%.
When you look at college graduation, when you look at college graduation, you're right. But let's understand
I know I'm right. So the question is there any economist?
Let's understand exactly why that is. That's because those college students, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. It's your show, but I want to answer your question. So let me stop.
And I want to hear your answer.
Okay, so the answer is that those young people are often not eligible to get things like in-state tuition or for scholarships to college. If we if they're able to get green cards and then process to citizenship, like other immigrants, they will then begin to have graduation rates.
If they get more benefits, that somehow this country will be rich. Yes, they are. Yes, they are benefits.
Congress.
I'm sorry. These are people who aren't U.S. citizens. They're not here legally, and you're saying with a straight face that we have some moral and economic obligation to pay for more benefits for these people. And it's just, I don't believe that has popular support, but perhaps I'm wrong.
Well, I would again point only to the poll from your own network, which says 82% of Americans support it.
Right, that's it, right. Without any details in it. Right.
Actual scientific polling.
Actual science. Yeah, I hear that every night. Mr. Fernandez, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, Tucker.
Oprah Winfrey's Golden Globe speech has everyone speculating about a possible presidential run, and for some reason, a lot of people seem very excited about it. Try to figure that out next. The current president is the first person to jump straight from television to the presidency. He may not be the last. We learned that last night during the Golden Globes. There was a heavy focus on sexual assault and harassment. Hundreds of actors quietly enabled that behavior for years, of course, but last night they collectively vowed to stop it. Boy, if you didn't weep as hard as Tom Hanks did, you're just not human. The speech didn't just win Oprah applause. Many people, predictably, are talking about Oprah running for president this morning because there are 24 hours to fill on cable news. That speculation was fueled by reports on Monday that Oprah is seriously considering a run. Jennifer Rubin, who poses as a conservative over at the Washington Post, tweeted, "Oprah Yates 2020. Sad old Bill Kristol, the former editor of the Weekly Standard, tweeted, #I'm with her. That's all the kids are saying that. MSNBC host Joy Reid suggested Oprah is already the president, at least in spirit. Quote, switch back to the Golden Globes to watch Oprah get her award. Never let it be said that I don't respect the president of the United States. That'd be a spiritual president, of course. Wendy Asifo is a college professor, and she joins us tonight. Wendy, it's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So, actually, just a moment of seriousness now. Oprah's very talented, which is one of the great communicators, actually, and obviously. If she ran in the Democratic primary, she'd win. Absolutely. I mean, that's all daytime TV viewers voting in that primary, and she would win. How would you feel if you were Senator Gillibrand or one of the people who spent years kind of preparing for this, planning to run in the primary, getting blown out by Oprah?
I guess I'll feel the same way that Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush felt or Ted Cruz felt when Trump blew them out. This is not something for us to look at in a vacuum, so to speak. Oprah Winfrey is very talented. She brings people together. She's not divisive. She makes you feel warm inside. And right now, our country is very divided. And what she did last night was she healed us. She brought us all together. And that is what is needed.
Wait, hold on. How did she heal us?
She healed us because she spoke to issues that a lot of people are facing, whether you're a woman. She even intertwined racial division. She mentioned that in there. She talked about, not just women coming together, but women and men coming together. That's what we need in a leader.
Women and men come together kind of naturally and have for biological reasons for, a while now.
Absolutely. But what we have seen is with the Me Too movement, it has been women who have been standing up saying what is happening to us, whether we are working in Hollywood or whether we're working in politics, is not good. But we need to have men who are also saying the same thing. And Oprah made sure to call to arms to say everyone needs to come together. So to answer your question...
So you weren't bothered by the pictures of her kissing Harvey Weinstein or anything like that? That didn't seem a little... weird.
It's not that it's weird. There's lots of people who are kissing Harvey Weinstein, right? And even our own president right now has been accused of sexual harassment.
No, but
so let's not go down that.
First stone, I get it. But if you, but it's one thing to go from kissing Harvey Weinstein to being the face of Me Too. Shouldn't there be an intermediate step where you say, "Sorry, I kissed Harvey Weinstein"?
Great point. Let's talk about the intermediate step. The intermediate step is that in 1990, Oprah actually passed a bill in which made sure that people who abused children were registered.
Oprah passed a bill?
No, it's named after her. It's called the Oprah Bill. It's the National Child Protection Act in 1990. So she has a history of doing things.
Of being in the Congress and passing legislation.
No, she has a history.
And now she's healing
No, she has a history of moving things forward by using her platform. And that's what we need. We need a leader who uses their platform to do things that are positive. That's what Donald Trump does not do. And that's what Oprah has done for countless years. And in 1990, Donald Trump even said if he had a VP, it would be Oprah Winfrey.
For sure. So, but I wonder, though, if it's, being a universally beloved daytime talk show host and talking about, whatever she talked about, is a little different from being a politician, right? Wouldn't she become slightly less beloved, maybe slightly more divisive if she were to weigh in on some of the thorny issues of the day?
Maybe she could. I mean, look at Donald Trump. He has become more divisive. But the difference is that with Oprah Winfrey, she stuck to the script. She stuck to healing. She stuck to making sure our nation is coming together. She did not say one side is better than the other. And what's really important here with Oprah Winfrey, and that we need to keep at the forefront. I can't tell if you're being serious or not. I am being so honest with you.
The whole healing thing, that's totally real? You felt healed?
You didn't have a tearjerker moment when she was talking?
I wept like a child, obviously, as I always do when I watch Oprah. Did it give you any pause that, like, Bill Kristol took time out from advocating for an Iran invasion to support Oprah? Do you think maybe, whoa, this is not the Oprah I know, the one who gets support from Bill Kristol?
No, it's not that. For me, I felt that 2018 is off to a good start, where we saw someone who was rallying the country in a positive way. And whether that's Oprah Winfrey, if Bill Kristol decides to jump on that bandwagon, that's all great. It's good that we're coming together for something good.
But I wonder if maybe, because you're not really describing a politician, you're describing
Donald Trump
religious figure?
She's not a religious figure. But
you're saying, hold on, she heals people, she passes legislation without even being in Congress.
No.
She brings men and women together. I mean,
she uses her platform for good. That is what a leader does. It's not about being religious.
I'm afraid to criticize her now. I had some snarky remarks, but I'm not going to keep them to myself.
We can criticize her, but we have to give her kudos, and that is she uses her platform effectively.
I'm going to need to go to confession if I even think an unkind thought about Oprah Winfrey at this point. Can we use her last name?
Yes.
Okay. Wendy, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mark Stein, he's been watching Oprah too, thinking about her running for president. He joins us next. Well, for months, an Oprah Winfrey presidential run was just idle speculation. Now it feels almost inevitable. Thanks to Donald Trump, the age of the celebrity politician may be upon us. And stay here. Mark Stein is an author and columnist. He joins us tonight. Mark, I want to be clear at the outset and on the record that I'm not in any way criticizing Oprah. I think it's a federal crime. And I pledge never to criticize Oprah in any way. And so I'm not doing that now. But I'm wondering what you made of the reaction to Oprah Winfrey last night, where you had people, even Republicans, or purportedly Bill Kristol, jumping in and saying, run Oprah. What is that?
Well, I think Bill Kristol, if you recall his tweet from a couple of months ago saying how much he supports the deep state against Trump, I think we should draw from Bill Kristol's support of Oprah's candidacy that she has been an agent of the deep state for many years, and that's why Bill Kristol supports her.
It wouldn't surprise me, given the control she seems to have over people's minds. I think we're both assuming that if she ran in the Democratic primary, she'd get the nomination, right?
Absolutely, because look, you have to figure out, and Wendy acknowledged this in a certain sense, if you're the Democrats, you want to try and drag Bill de Blasio or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie over the finish line, or do you just want to cut to the chase and go with Oprah? And they're betting that if it's Trump versus Oprah, he's not going to be able to do to her what he did to Jeb and Hillary. And and in a sense, that's valid. She was by far the least idiotic person at that awards ceremony last night. I mean, she was crafty and cunning in the way she tied her personal story to this Me Too business. Which I think is actually one of the interesting things about it. To me, that ceremony was ludicrous. I felt for Rose McGowan and Rosanna Arquette and Mira Sorvino, as I felt for the girls in Rotherham, England, I spoke to, who'd been sexually abused by these Muslim grooming gangs, and then watched as all these opportunist activists and politicians turned the scandal into a way to advance themselves up the greasy pole, and the victims were ignored. And that's exactly what happened last night. Mira and Rosanna and Rose McGowan didn't get any invites to the Golden Globes, and instead all these ridiculous A-listers like Meryl Streep came along and said, well, I'm going to show how much I support defenseless women by only wearing black. So I've ordered my couturier to dress me like Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's. That'll show them. And it was completely preposterous. And Oprah actually took Oprah, who was more opportunist than any of them, actually seized that issue and appropriated it to herself, which I'd be annoyed about if I were Mira Sorvino, but she did it at a skill level that's way beyond Nicole Kidman or Meryl Streep or any of those other ladies.
No, she's talented. There's no question about it, and she certainly is a brilliant communicator. Someone said to me, though, recently, someone who shall remain nameless because he doesn't want to be charged with a crime either, said, I respect Oprah, but sometimes there is, this man said to me, I feel like she doesn't like me, Right. Doesn't like me. You think a lot of people feel that way, or what percentage of the population feels like Oprah is on their side?
Well, the question is whether Oprah is on her side. I mean, she gave a rather curious interview, I think it was to the BBC a couple of years ago, where she said that really just old white people need to die. I mean, there is and this is where it gets to Wendy's thing about how she heals us all and she brings us all together. And I'm not actually sure at this stage that talking about Sidney Poitier and Rosa Parks does do that. I mean, for a start, I'm not sure it's anything to do with the challenges we face today, not just because America has elected a black president and the Golden Globes is full of famous and prominent black celebrities, and indeed a biracial American woman is about to marry into the royal family in a couple of months. So it's not just that her parents didn't have a thing about race, but Her Majesty the Queen, who has to approve every royal marriage, doesn't either. And so there was something slightly weird in her attempt, which was effective with the crowd, in trying to connect all these kind of traditional racial tropes to the Me Too thing.
Yes.
Let's not forget, by the way, that all these feel-good movies she's made, like The Butler, that were distributed by Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein wanted a piece of all those affirmative action, feel-good, boosterish movies because it was a great way to get chicks, liberal chicks, to go up to your hotel room. There are all kinds of contradictions at play in the path she's trying to negotiate here.
Everything's more complicated than it looks. Mark Stein, thank you.
That's right.
For being a Sherpa through that twisted path.
Yeah, which we all need more healing, as Wendy. It's more complicated than it looks, Tucker.
I'm for healing. Thank you, Mark. Some of Apple's own investors are terrified and saying so publicly by how addictive that company's products are, especially to children, and they're not alone. Up next, a big and very well-known tech investor says he now regrets helping create Google and Facebook. Stay tuned for that. Some of Silicon Valley's biggest investors are beginning to ask tough questions about the world they helped create. Over the weekend, two major investors in Apple, Jana Partners and the California State Teachers Retirement System, sent a letter to Apple urging the company to do more to fight smartphone addiction among young people. Roger McNamee co-founded Elevation Partners. He was an early investor in both Facebook and Google, which was a great thing financially. But now he says he regrets some of what those companies have become. Roger McNamee joins us tonight. Roger, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Tucker. It's good to be here.
It's kind of amazing to even begin this conversation with you, considering you so famously made great bets on both those companies, and now you're concerned about what they're doing. Explain your concerns.
It's really simple, Tucker. The problem that we have here is that many of us, and I count myself among the number, have viewed technology as one of those things that was only goodness, that there really was no downside to it. And for the longest time, that was true. Now, because smartphones are available 18 hours a day, and because companies like Facebook and Google have personalized 2 billion individual channels, so each of us has their own programming all the time, addiction is actually an inevitable result of their advertising business models.
Yes.
And it's not something we saw. And I personally look back on this and I'm kicking myself for not having seen it. At the same time, I've committed myself full-time with my partners, Tristan Harris and others, to try to start a national conversation about what is the appropriate role of technology, what is the best way to protect our children. And I'm delighted to see that there are large institutional investors who are bringing their market power to bear to try to call attention both to the issue and to provoke companies to do the right thing.
So I assume you still live out in the peninsula or in the Bay Area. How unpopular are you? I mean, this is the most countercultural thing you could do, I would think.
Well, it's a really interesting thing because I think you're right. For the longest time, Silicon Valley didn't want to believe that there was a problem. I mean, everybody likes disruption because it's easy. What they don't want is to bear the consequences of having done that disruption. And now that they're being called to task, what's really, really cool, I wrote a thing in the Washington Monthly this past weekend that brought CEOs to me to start conversations for the first time. So, I'm not worried about popularity. That's not what this is about. I'm really worried about our children. I'm worried about the country. I'm worried about democracy. I'm worried about what goes on in the world. I just think that we don't want to be made more lonely. We don't want to be made more sad.
That's right.
We don't want to be made more unsuccessful. We for sure don't want that happening to our kids.
So what do you think the right way to, and you're saying this as a very informed, unusually informed person on this question, how is it the best way to manage your children's use of these devices?
So I think the really important thing for every parent to understand is that there are a lot of bad things that can happen here. I mean, we think about products like YouTube Kids. We think about products like Snapchat. These are products whose business models are designed around this notion of addiction by the kids, and they're just not prepared to deal with it. So parents need to restrict usage of these products. In fact, one of the sad things, Tucker, one of the things that makes me angry is that executives out in the Valley generally restrict their kids' usage of the products that they are encouraging everyone else to use with abandon. And so I think the first thing to do is you got to explain to the kids, hey guys, there's a lot of bad stuff going on here and it's not your fault. And, I wish we had caught this before it had become an epidemic problem.
It's amazing. I mean, everything you said, it makes sense. It seems obvious. For our viewers who don't know who you are, I would encourage them to Google you, because they will see that coming from you, this is profound. You really are a whistleblower right in the middle of it.
This was a huge change for me. I mean,
well, I
was
mean,
proud
it's
of Facebook.
amazing.
I'm proud of it. Listen, this is my national service right now. I'm
well,
trying
it's amazing
to do
that you're
something
doing
good.
it.
Well,
and I'm grateful that you are. Thank you, Roger.
And let's keep the conversation going. You got 4 girls. We got to take good care of them, okay?
Anytime. Thanks. Well, mayors in France are begging the national government in that country for help as their cities are besieged by migrants. The incomparable Katie Hopkins here with a report from the continent next. French cities remain inundated with thousands of migrants who are living on the streets. In a November speech in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou, the capital, the French president explained why many of them must go and leave France. Quote, "I can't tell my middle classes who work, who pay taxes, that it's great. We're going to welcome everybody into the country," he said. "That's ridiculous. Who's going to pay for that? You'll just fuel racism and xenophobia. That doesn't exist, totally open frontiers. That just doesn't work." Katie Hopkins is with Rebel Media, and she joins us tonight. So, Katie, that was the president of France, the historic rival to your island kingdom. Can you imagine an English leader saying, a political figure in the UK saying something like that out loud?
No, not at all. I think Macron, hopefully, is going to come back really strong on migration. I hope he's going to up the number of asylum seekers, rejected asylum seekers that are deported. And I think the mayors, the 7 mayors that have written these letters saying that they are overwhelmed by migrants, they are looking for fast action. And they're also looking for the rest of France to share the problem. At the moment, it's very much around the periphery of France, in the departments around the edge of France. And I think what those mayors are really saying is we need everyone else to take some of the share and to bear the load. But he is talking tough on migration, and you can see why, because Merkel hasn't been tough enough on migration, and as a result, she's just had her worst polling for 70 years, which pleases me no end, because I think the woman is dead behind the eyes.
Oh, I agree completely. It just seems it's so odd to have a president of France speaking like this, far tougher on migration than the Prime Minister of the UK.
Absolutely. I think Theresa May has been nothing but a disappointment to so many of us, because she seems to be a massive appeaser. The more that we get attacked, the more we are threatened by the people that she welcomed to our country, the more we seem to pander to them. And that's craziness. To hear Macron coming back really strong is a very positive thing. And of course, there are other people now coming out strong as well. We've got Italian elections coming up on March the 4th. It looks like they will go centre-right, right-wing, anti the EU. And of course, the Eastern Europeans are rising up as well, and they're saying no more migrants. We've got Poland, Hungary, others all saying, no, we won't take your quotas, we aren't taking any more people, and we're rejecting the migrants from our country. And I think that gives us some indication of the sort of spirit of the people that are now saying, we don't want these people anymore. We've just seen a report out in Germany that says that 90% of violent crime, that's an uptick in violent crime, 90% is committed by migrants. And there's so many of us that are saying, yes, we knew this all along. We did try to tell you when we said back in 2015, stop the boats. We said that for good reason. I never understand this idea, Tucker, that just because we're doing better than another country, you just invite yourself over. You know, like as if my mother-in-law, for example, likes to come over for Sunday roast. I don't invite her all the time because I don't want her in my house. In the same way as just because people want to join our country, we don't have to accept them just because they want to come because we're doing rather better than they are. I think it's okay to refuse people, and it's okay to say no. And if you're really a migrant fleeing from a country, how is it that you decided to leave your women and your children behind? Was it really that scary that you left the girls and you ran away? These are economic migrants.
Great
and
question.
I think we're within our rights to say no.
I want to wish you good luck with your mother-in-law, Katie, and I hope she doesn't watch Fox. Great to see you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. One note before we go tonight, my comments during an earlier segment led some viewers to believe that I don't love Oprah Winfrey with my whole heart. For that, I apologize. I realize that's a violation of federal law, and it's not what I intended at all. I love Oprah profoundly.